You just press play on the Last Breath Huntcast, home of the Huntroversy. We're here to entertain, educate, and engage. And in case you didn't know, you only live once. But if you do it right, once is enough. Don't waste it. All right, everyone, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Last Breath Huntcast presented by Badlands Gear. If you'd like to get some Badlands gear for yourself, we've got a great discount code for 30% off anything site-wide. You name it, tents, packs, jackets, bibs, bottoms, everything from gaiters to neck gaiters, and everything in between. And it's really high-quality gear that we believe in. So big shout-out to Badlands for presenting this podcast. And our topic for the next several episodes, this is episode 101. Garrett is across from me, and for the next 5 to 10 episodes, we're going to be talking exclusively about things that we do that I feel that we overlook, and specifically whitetail strategy focused.
Yeah, really quick before we dive into our topic, I do want to say that Father's Day is coming up and very quick. So this drops on a Monday. If you're listening to it as it drops, you can order something on Badlands with our discount code. Get your father that you know or want to get a gift for, and it'll be here on time. On top of their gear, they have some really cool lifestyle wear too. So, I mean, with our code, you can pick them up a jacket or a pair of pants or a hoodie for pretty reasonable, and it's something that I'll definitely want to wear. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we start. As Grant alluded, I have 5 different topics that I know I want to talk about, and today we're talking about thermals and scents, but there's also going to be things like stand placement and really kind of going into the rudimentary factors of when we start hanging a stand from the bottom up, talk about what we do there. Next, we're going to go into like whitetail phenology, the life cycle, the actual life cycle of a whitetail, and how by understanding that, it makes you a better hunter. Because as the season progresses and changes, as the year changes, so does that deer in the way that he thinks, the way that they work a piece of ground, all of the above. We're going to dive into that. Land manipulation. And we say manipulation because it truly is manicuring the land to become more successful. So we're going to talk about that in more detail and parts. Not so much food plotting as we covered that in the last podcast, but just specifically managing and manipulating the land to benefit you. And then cameras. We're going to talk about how cameras have revolutionized the way we change, and really to take a deep dive into how we use those throughout the year and specifically during season to, again, yield us opportunities. So, Mr. Putnam, today it's thermals.
Yep. So thermals are a thing I feel like we were talking earlier that we overlook, I feel, that we've begun to understand over the course of the last, 15 years of hunting together, and we've really been exploiting for the last 5 to 8 years with some pretty good success. And basically, putting it in layman's terms, thermals are simply when the earth is hotter than the air temperature. So those mornings when you get a really deep cold spike in air temperature and the world has not caught up to the air temperature yet, it's not equalized or below that, and that the heat radiating off of the earth is moving upwards into the atmosphere and carrying your scent with it. That's kind of a basic understanding of what a thermal is, and how we use those is kind of a different focus of conversation all in of itself. And that is when our wind is marginal or bad. We'll take advantage of thermals in those kind of scenarios, which I think is going to be the context of what we're talking about and why we're discussing thermals today.
So I would like to say that thermals is different than wind. When we're talking about thermals, as you said, either the air is getting drawn away from the earth or it's getting drawn to the earth.
Yep.
And it depends on, as you said, the temperature of the air and the temperature of the ground. Mm-hmm. 2 huge factors. We're talking about Midwest thermals, not mountain thermals. They're similar in the way that they work, but different as well. And with wind, obviously, you have wind, which is directional, very, very cardinal directional, where we're literally talking about up or down. Mm-hmm. And what I think you were talking about or alluding to is that you can get away, as you begin to learn how thermals work, you can get away and really cheat the wind sometimes to your advantage. And we did this year. It yielded us an opportunity at a beautiful deer because of it. And understanding that, especially if you complement thermals with wind direction, then you're almost bulletproof. On top of the fact that I think that probably more times than not, when you have the thermals in your favor, there is a certain amount of time that you put near R. And I think, just like you said, we didn't realize it. We got better at hunting the wind as we progressed, and then we started to understand thermals. And when you tie all that together, it's pretty dang convincing how if you sit down and look at our track record as we've hunted, by adding these to our arsenal of tactics, it makes it worth it. The one thing we do need to touch base, though, is that our ground scent. Thermals do not eliminate your ground scent. Your access still needs to be very good to your stand, and be conscious of that. You can be, as bulletproof as you want on your body, but your boots always touch the ground. So until we figure out hover shoes to be able to right to our
zip
stand,
lining.
Yeah, we're always going to lay that ground scent. So as we talk about this stuff, and we talk about how we're cutting like the edge or getting a little pushy with these thermals, getting a little edgy, note that we still need to maintain good access in and out, because those deer, especially a mature deer or that old doe, she's gonna pick up that ground scent, and later in the year, the worse it gets. So just be conscious of your boots. They should be sacred to your scent. But anyway, go into diving about thermals and really what times we key in on them to our advantage.
Yep. So thermals, typically, I would say 9 times out of 10 when you and I discuss thermals and what we can get away with, we're talking specifically about the morning, and even more focused in on the first 2 to 3 hours of the morning. Basically thinking about how long is the earth going to be hotter than the air temperature is. So on those days when
colder.
we have a very, very...
The earth's colder.
How hot the ground is in relativity to the air. And as long as the ground is hotter than the air, it's going to continue to rise and push up.
Correct. Yep.
That's what I mean.
Yep.
So on those mornings when we've got really deep cold fronts coming in, and we'll get into our stand, sometimes at 4:40, 5 o'clock, all the way up to your 7, 8, 9 o'clock mark. Basically, when we're using thermals, we're using it as a tool to avoid a bad wind direction. We use this strategy a lot during the rut, because during the rut, we want to sit in our best stands. And if we can get away with doing so, even if it's a bad wind, according to the forecast, for example, we got 2 opportunities where at 2 mature deer this year. One, it was just slightly before camera light, in a stand in a bottom. And that particular morning, we would ideally hunt that on a northwest wind or a northerly wind. We have a bedding area to the north of us, and for whatever reason, it was a southerly wind. And on those southern winds, eastern winds, western winds, and things that are not as ideal as north for us, we'll sneak in using thermals close to where we need to be into our best stand setups. So those particular locations are ones we want to be in, because we're like, all right, there's something about this that we need to be in here, whether it's a rut funnel or a pinch or really close to doe bedding, something like that during the rut, where we're like, all right, it's the 10th of November, we're going for broke, but thermals aid you in going for broke. So if you have the wrong wind, you can get away with hunting in a stand in the morning until the thermals flip for you for a couple hours, and usually those couple of first hours of hunting are the best ones anyway. A couple first hours and a couple last hours of the day. So that's basically the scenario in which we try to use thermals, specifically looking at weather. We'll check the wind direction. Typically it's day by day. We'll talk to each other in the evening before we go hunting in the morning, make sure we're both dialed in on where we're going to go and why we're going to go there based on trail camera data and other things. Say, here's where we want to go. How long can we get away with sitting there? And that yielded us, like I said, 2 opportunities just this past season at really nice deer, 20 yards in front of our stand.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, though, understand that it's not like, it's in the mid-20s this evening, we're hunting wherever we want. Mm-hmm. That's not what we're saying here. We do try to hunt the wind as much as possible, but as Grant alluded, when you have, especially, most of the people listening, guys like us, we only have a certain amount of time that we can hunt. You save up your vacation or you're a weekend warrior. Sometimes when the time is right of the year and it's on, you have to be somewhat aggressive, but understand that thermals help. They're not foolproof, though. I mean, there's always an opportunity to get winded, but what we're talking about is if you're in the stand on one of those really brisk mornings, the sun starts to come up and you know, it's cold enough you can see your breath, and you just watch your breath leave your mouth and just fade up. And what that is the morning thermal. Literally, the ground is warmer, so the hot air is rising, and even though the ambient air is still cold, that warm air from the earth is pulling all your scent upwards. And you do have an opportunity for it to drift a little bit with the wind, but for the most part, it's going up and away from the deer's nose. A couple things, though, with this is that you don't want to enter your stand too early. And that's something that you'll have to get used to, because when it's cold and dark out, the wind is still going to be directional. So specifically if you're hunting like a bedding area, as we talked about, you want to get in kind of as close to first light as you really can, because before those thermals activate, before the sun comes up and starts to heat up and pull that air upwards, you have an opportunity for that cold air to still be directional with the wind. So, you know, it's usually a great thing to get in really early, right? Sneak in, quiet. But when you're hunting thermal, specifically that bad wind thermal, it's one of those things where I feel like maybe a little bit later.
Sleep in 30 or 40 minutes and then go.
Yeah, it's a little bit better. And then when you're hunting, we can feel it. When you're hunting in about that 9:30, 10 o'clock range, depending on how much the power the sun's got, you can feel it change. You'll physically start to warm up a little bit, and use your breath. As soon as you stop seeing your breath rise, that's a cue where more times than not, we'll jump out of the stand and switch locations. We're not done hunting for the day.
No.
But we can't hunt here, right?
Correct.
We
If the wind is wrong.
Correct.
We can stay there. If the wind is wrong,
yes,
that's when we move, though.
Yes. So this year was the rut 9. We went in there on the wrong wind, but we knew we had perfect thermals. We got in
first couple hours.
Yeah, and I mean, we set up no more than we get set up as when that rut night came in. So we hit it perfectly for that purpose. You know, we didn't sit in there and stink up the place, quote unquote, too long. And it was like immediate. We got clipped in, camera arm on. We just went back to back on the tree, and it was 3 minutes. I'm like, right here, dude.
Yep.
I mean, and you're going, what? I was running a time lapse of the sunrise. That's how
early it was.
And it all worked out perfectly. The other thing that's really nice about this too is I think the second one you're talking about is when you're decoying. You know, decoying is a great way to use thermals to aid you, specifically in the morning, because that deer is going to scent check the decoy. But if your scent, most of it is going upwards, he's got to get really close to get a nose full of that. So it can help you a lot when you're running a decoy and really bring those deer, those curious or those aggressive deer in close without getting alerted.
Yeah, that's another great point when speaking about a decoy, because more times than not, we're going to be using a decoy in the morning during the rut. Not that we haven't used a decoy in the evening. In fact, we killed Crunch this year, with a decoy in the evening. But the majority of times we're taking one in, it's going to be in the morning. And I think that by understanding when that thermal flips and being able to ride that fine line of saying, all right, I'm looking on my weather app here. For you and I, we have WeatherBug and the Weather Channel app. And as soon as we're like, all right, once it gets to about this temperature, that's going to be about it. And for us, it always is about that anywhere between 7:30 and 9 o'clock mark. And now this year, with how hot it was and how hot it got so quickly,
it was earlier.
This year it was earlier. You know, we were only sitting in certain stands till like 6:30 or 6:40. In fact, the day that we shot K2, it was like 7:05, and we're like, "Are you ready to get down yet?" Kind of thing. Like it's flipping. We need to go check some trail cameras, move some stuff around. We're gonna need to go rehang a stand, and I think being cognizant of when that flip is going to occur is going to be a really big thing for you. And I like what you said about getting in there early, but not too early, because until that sun starts heating the earth or heating the air temperature up, you're putting yourself in position for, if you're at least hunting a bedding area scenario like you referenced, heartbreak, and your hunt's going to be kind of over before it started if you scent check a whole bedding area because you're in there too early. So lots of people will even, in fact, not go in on days when they know this is going to happen until like sunrise. They'll make sure that the thermals are on their side, then they'll walk in and do their little 90, 80 minutes sit, whatever, and see what happens. And, you know, during these times, I feel like most hunters that I talk to that use thermals well, it's usually during the rut and usually getting towards that tail end of the bow hunter's rut, like the opportunity side of the rut. I'm not talking about the peak rut when the majority of the does are in estrus. I'm talking about the peak of the seeking and chasing phase. So like that 8th through the 13th, 14th time frame, most people are like, all right, nothing happened in the first week of November for me or the last week of October. I couldn't seal the deal. I want to go in the stand. I want to be in here. I know this is where I have to be. Use the thermals to your advantage to get where you want to be.
Right.
If that's your high opportunity stand and you're, you know, say you're a guy hunting a smaller tract of land, you know, we've hunted plenty of them in our time, and you may only have 1 or 2 stands hung up there. So you don't want to kind of cut yourself off at the knees, so to speak, before your hunt even starts by getting in there too early and allowing the wrong wind, if you are going and sitting on a wrong wind, to kind of screw you that way. So that's basically what I got.
Yeah, I think the inverse side of that is that you have thermals in the evening, which is the exact opposite of the morning thermals. So when that sun sets, and we've all, again, been there, specifically in November. November is a magical month for multiple reasons, but specifically how temperate it is. You know, you have an opportunity for, you know, usually in the teens sometimes, lows at night, and then, you know, daytime highs upwards in the 50s. So you got a 30, sometimes 40-degree swing. Yep. With that, you're going to have those strong pulls and pushes of air.
Yep.
When the evening sets in and when that sun sets, it happened, I remember it like it was yesterday with the hunt for crunch. We were facing west, sun went down, and immediately the chill set in. And so with that, you have the opposite effect where the air is now getting pulled back down towards the ground. This can be used to your advantage, especially if you're hunting some bluff country. Friends of ours like Austin Meyer that hunts some really bluffy country. If you have a stand that's right on the edge of a ridge, well, that cold air is going to pull it down into that draw. So if you are in a spot where you have a very deep cut and the deer don't use it because it's so thick or so steep, or you just don't see a lot of traffic down there, but you're hunting the ridge above it, this could be one of those things where you could use that to your advantage and know that when the evening thermals switch, just like on a mountain, as they start to roll down the mountain when the sun sets, same thing's going to happen in hill country or those bluff countries that we have. So we don't have the topography on our property to really pull that off, but it's something that definitely can be considered. Also note that too. So one of the stands you've heard us talk about is like a trench, and it is a cut. You know, it's not a deep cut like how some of the ground Austin Meyer has, where they're like crazy ravines, but it's probably, you know, I don't know, it's a nice just regular rolling cascade downhill.
I'd say you're dropping in elevation. I think it's 4 topography lines. So I think from the top of the field to the bottom of the ditch, like our creek that runs through, I think it's 40 feet.
Yeah, and so that's about right, and it's probably over the expanse of 100 yards. From field edge all the way to the creek.
Yep.
So again, it's not crazy steep, but it's enough that farmers haven't touched it and it's grown up in timber.
Yep.
But when you have that, know that your thermals are going to get sucked right down to it. So this is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing, because like that stand that we talk about, those thermals in the evening are going to pull it right to our shooting lane.
Yep.
Right down to it. And usually it's not going to roll back up the other side. It's going to keep going downhill, just like gravity or the water would flow.
Yep.
So kind of keep that in mind, because as long as you know that, you can use it to your advantage. So in that scenario, you know, any of the deer that would be coming from the quote-unquote roadside would probably pick us up in the evening. But anything coming from the timber side is not.
The best way I would describe it is like if you guys have ever lived or been in a 2-story house that's poorly insulated and you have a window unit in the upstairs of that 2-story house, and you go to the stairs and you go to the bottom of the stairs on the first floor and you open the door, or you're just standing there, you can feel like the cold air rolling down the stairs hitting your feet. Well, that's what we're talking about here. So
Perfect
in the
analogy.
evenings, that cold air is going to be crushing downwards, and there are scenarios in which it's absolutely perfect to manipulate that to your advantage. I'm I'm a larger fan of using them in the morning. However, a scenario in which I feel like they could be used in the evening, like the scenario for crunch, is if you are somewhere on the edge, like that field that we killed crunch in. It's a alfalfa field, and it's 4 acres, and it's like a tabletop, literally, and there's huge ravines on either side of it. And so we set up on the edge with a particular wind that we like, so that way it blows over the top of those lowland bottom areas. And by the time that those deer are filtering out into the plot and out in front of us, then we're pushing it down to where they came from. So it's kind of a really touchy, flip of the coin there. So I feel like the evening thermals can be used, just like you said, if you think about it enough and you put yourself in a scenario where those thermals can aid your hunt and mask you and mask your presence from the deer that you're seeking to kill, I think it could be really deadly too.
Yep. And I will agree wholeheartedly that I would prefer to hunt a morning thermal for a couple reasons. I think most importantly that the morning thermals are longer.
Yep.
You can ride that thermal for, as you referenced, probably 2 hours on average, I would say.
On average,
where the evening thermal really, when that change happens, when the sun sets or right before
it's like
it,
30 minutes.
Yeah.
40 minutes.
So you'd be sitting there. I guess what I'm alluding to is that evening thermals, you're probably hunting the wind anyway.
Yes.
Just be conscious of the thermal could either help you or hurt you depending on where it's getting pulled. Because for me, if I'm not going to go in to hunt a thermal in the evening just because it's for the last 30 minutes. I want to hunt the last 3 hours or more, right? So I'm going to have the wind already going where I want it to. We're conscious about, as we talked about, like the trench, we know that those last 20 or 30 minutes, which are often really good, I'm going to have, my wind might be fighting those thermals a little bit, and it's going to get pulled towards the creek, even though we're hunting it to push us out into the field.
Yep.
I think we should talk about ground scent. We've talked about thermals and how it's helped us a lot, and when you understand them, it's game changing, especially when you're down in the last couple days or those 4 or 5 magical days where you want to push it.
Those do or die days.
But with ground scent, a couple things that I think we sometimes take for granted is that almost ever, I say this with an asterisk because every once in a while we're like, after we kill, we're all giddy or whatever, but we almost never wear our boots outside of the field. Our hunting boots, we each have a pair of knee-high rubbers, and we each have a pair of like waterproof hikers. And those boots don't ever see the truck. We don't walk into the gas station with them. I mean, they're pretty much treated like a king, And I say that again with small asterisk, because when we get excited when we kill, we might jump in the truck and go run over to the father-in-law's or come back home. But for the most part, we put those on in the field. And we wear like our Walmart Crocs, when we're getting dressed or driving in the truck.
And we spray the ever-living, shit out of our boots. For, the first 10-ish years that we hunted together, we would spray our entire bodies, and we still will spray like our face masks under our pits, like neck area, front and back area, the crotch kind of thing, where most of the odor on a human body is going to come from. But the majority of that scent spray that we use, which I think we fooled more than a couple of deer with our ground scent that have cut our ground scent in the past. I think it's just a combination. One of my biggest pet peeves when I listen to a podcast or listen to something is saying, well, there's these hard lines and hard rules of hunting and you can't violate them and otherwise you're screwed. And I don't think that's the case at all, but I think what our hunting strategy is basically, how can we optimize everything? All the things that are under our control, how do we manipulate that into our favor?
Yep.
What are all these little tiny things that we can do to yield us a better outcome or more opportunities than somebody that didn't do all those little things? And I think spraying our boots diligently and not using, not walking into breakfast in a cafe or something after your hunt. And not saying if you want to wear that and do that, that's completely fine. Go for it. But that's just not something we do.
Right. Our hunting boots are our hunting boots. They're not our hunting boots and chore boots and play boots.
And now I have to go scoop snow boots.
Yeah.
No,
that's not. And it might not be your bread and butter, and that's cool. But it's definitely something we do. And I think you hit it on the head. Whatever we can do that we believe is going to give us a better chance, we're going to do it. So spraying down our boots, we use Scentaway. We've had a lot of success with it, especially recently. It seems to work almost better than anything we've ever tried before. Now, and I'll say this, that, we've had deer cut our path. And mind you, we are different than a lot of people listening to the podcast. There's 2 of us every time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's twice as much ground scent. And we've had deer stop at our scent and kind of sniff it and then
flick their tail and continue
keep
on
going.
their way.
We did not one time last year have a deer cut our ground scent and turn around and go the other way, or even worse, blow and stomp. Mm-hmm. So what we've been doing has worked in that. It's fooled them enough that they think, maybe that was yesterday's scent, or maybe it wasn't enough for them to realize it was human odor. They picked it up but couldn't really tell what it was, and it worked really well. We never once had a deer cut our scent and then come to the base of our tree.
Yep.
That's a tried and true factor that a deer is picking up your scent, is when it, you might have them fooled enough that they're not taking it as a threat, but you might not have them confused enough to not be interested. Those deer that you have cut your ground scent and then walk right to the base of your tree, like that deer's smelling something of you, whether it's your boots or whatever. I mean, that is not a good situation to be, because you're just waiting for them to go and look right up and peg you. And then there's no shot because they're right at the base of your tree, and you're kind of screwed. But a couple other tricks that we always do with our boots is, if there's ever any puddles or creeks that we have an opportunity to walk across,
we walk through them.
We walk through them. We kind of dig our feet into the mud or into the vegetation. Another great trick is, you have any cedar trees around you, rub your boots, scrape your boots on that cedar. It's super pungent. Dandelions in early season are incredibly pungent if you step on those and crunch them up. Things like that are just, you're on your way to the stand. If you have an opportunity just to rustle your feet in the underbrush, especially if it's one of those really aromatic weeds or flowers, it's only going to help. And then I guess going into the wind is a quick topic. It's quite simple. If a deer is downwind of you and long enough, I think if that deer wants to, they will smell you. There's a lot of people that swear by a lot of products, and I do think that a lot of products out there can help you. But again, inevitably,
and to be transparent, we use a lot of that. So we are, we use ozone to treat our camo. We have a scent slammer bag that we put our stuff in. We wash it after every kill. We wash it after you get pretty sweaty, so we'll wash it every couple days to just make sure it's if I can smell this myself, if I can pick up my camo and I can smell the armpit of it and it smells like me, then that is the equivalent of a deer getting hit in the face with a sledgehammer.
Oh, yeah.
He can smell it, from several hundred yards away. So we do use that. And like I was talking about earlier, I think it's just one of those things where this is not hurting us at all.
Nope.
So we're going to do it.
Yep. I had a whitetail biologist explain it to me, and I think I've said this before in the podcast, but he broke it down. He's like, when we smell cake as a human, he's like, we smell cake. He goes, when a deer smells cake, he smells every single ingredient in the cake. They smell the sugar, the flour, the vanilla, the cream cheese, and the frosting, where we just smell cake.
Yep.
And that's always stuck with me. That, like you said, if we can smell it, for damn sure that deer can smell it. That coyote can smell it. That elk, the bear, they got us pegged to no nth degree. But it's interesting, and it's there's no rhyme or reason. There's no special recipe, because if there was, dude, we'd tell it to you, and we'd never get busted or winded. Mm-hmm. But we definitely have increased our opportunities by controlling our scent as much as possible, by hunting the correct winds as much as possible, and by utilizing thermals to our advantage. Our number of getting quote-unquote winded has drastically become reduced. And even though it might happen once or twice a year, it is far and few and in between. And usually it's because we're getting pushy and making some moves to try to get something done.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think that if you take every piece of whitetail advice or hunting advice in general, and even the advice that we've given you here about thermals and when we use them, if you took all those things into an equation and tried to do them every single time, you'd burn yourself out and you'd never go hunting because you'd be waiting for that perfect moment. We're just talking about, all right, here's a trick to use. Let's say the wind is not in your favor, but you want to go into this best stand that you have, this location where you're like, there's a mature buck showing up anywhere between 6 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. every single day in here. I just have to be in here to catch him slipping up. And thermals would be a great tool for you to use without alerting them of your presence and, being able to pull off a wind that is not ideal for those first, 90 minutes, couple hours of daylight. And that's all we're really saying.
I think we didn't touch on this, but thermals are incredibly effective on those calmer mornings. Sometimes those dead still mornings are almost bad, or those really, really faint wind mornings are bad because you almost have that sense of your scent is just lingering. It's not getting drawn or pulled or pushed. But thermals actually work even better when you have those light wind conditions. Mm-hmm. Just like the Rut 9, it was pin drop quiet that morning. I heard him coming before we even saw him. And those, when it's faint and when those are the winds that deer can bust me, man. It's just a gradual little push. It's not whipping around or blowing strong enough that he only catches a breeze. Nah, he's taking it all to the nostrils. Those light mornings are when that area has an opportunity to really just skyrocket up because it's not getting really broken up or fragmented as it gets pushed by the wind.
Yeah. So the last thing I have kind of thinking about thermals, if you're in a bottom specifically and you feel that evening thermal coming down and pushing it back towards the lowest point of the draw that you're in, lots of times, for us, and it's just kind of by virtue of hunting a lot of agricultural ground, like why is ground not farmed in Illinois and Iowa and Missouri and Kansas? It's worth a lot of money, right? Why is it not farmed? Well, it's not farmed because there's something that makes it unfarmable. And in our case, most of the places that we hunt, it's because there is a creek at a low point and there is too high of an elevation or too steep of an angle to get a combine equipment in there that it's not worth the farmer's time to go in there, doze it, clear it out, and prep it for planting. So most of those positions that you and I are hunting are not very ideal, and they are hilly. And so if you're cognizant of that scent being pushed down and going to the lowest point in that draw, and you've got a deer coming right at sunset every day, like in the case of Crunch, he was right at dawn, right at dusk. So we knew he was bedding close. He knew he was bedding on us when we killed him. And I think if you're aware of that, then if you want to shoot the other side of a creek, then that's a good position to put yourself in because that scent is going to go down right to the lowest point of the creek and it's going to shoot out. And it's going to continue to take the path of least resistance to the lowest point because that's what cold air does. It's going to sink, the hot air is going to rise. And when you have an evening thermal, that's what's going to happen. So if you're aware of where the deer are coming or you have a theory on where they're coming to, going from, etc., then you can put yourself in a scenario for a shot opportunity based on that scent going to the lowest point.
Yeah.
And it hopefully not being in the path of the deer that you're trying to kill.
Yep.
So that kind of rounds us out on thermals. So the launch party tickets are going like absolute hotcakes, wildfire, whatever analogy you want to put on it right now. We've got 6 drop-off locations. We know that one is completely out. I've already given away, I don't know how many you gave me, 120, 125. Those are gone. I know the Whitetail Legacy guys are getting a bunch out right now.
What we're saying is that if you guys procrastinated more so than ever in years past, it seems like this event is getting a lot of traction this year, more so than it ever has. We can only give out a certain amount of tickets because there's only a certain amount of seats. And if you haven't gotten your ticket yet, I strongly advise that you do. Our radio ads haven't even hit yet.
Yep. And they hit in July. So you have about 2 weeks until about 500,000 people that are listening hear about it on the radio. So if you haven't gotten a ticket yet, we're urging you try to get in there before July because I can't guarantee that there are going to be any left after those radio ads start rolling.
Correct. So in layman's term, all of the 6 locations have tickets. Easy Living was completely out of tickets, and they ran out of 300 tickets in about 6 days. I gave them our last stack, so all of the tickets have been dispersed. If you come across a pickup location that does not have tickets, we strongly recommend that you call some of the other locations to see if they have tickets. And from there, you kind of can whittle your way out. If you run into a scenario where you've tried 3 or 4 or all the places, call them all, they're all out of tickets, message one of our social media platforms, either Facebook or Instagram, because all of the team members have some tickets. But Grant is like out already. I know that Logan and I are down to about 50-ish ourselves. So get your tickets, hold on to them, make sure you come. The stuff just keeps getting better and better and better. As we get closer to the event, more people are finding out, more companies are finding out, we're getting more stuff to give away. It's going to be an amazing night. We want to make sure that all you people listening, we appreciate the hell out of you guys supporting us. We want to make sure you can go and be a part of this night. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're probably going to stay up way too late. We're going to drink way too much beer, that's for sure. And we want everyone to be a part of it. So if you've listened and you've either been to an event or you've heard about it and you want to go, make sure you grab your tickets because they will probably be gone. I'm projecting by around that second week in July. And that's just like you said, once our radio ads hit, that's going to tap into a very large listener base. And when that happens, it'll probably be gone. Those tickets will be gone pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. And again, I know we've said this on previous podcasts, but the date for the launch party, which is a free hunting film event, 100% free admission, free beer, free gear, a bunch of really awesome films. That's Friday, July 23rd, 6:30 p.m. at the Adler Theater in Davenport, Iowa. Our ticket pickup locations are Easy Living in Milan, Mills Chevrolet in Davenport, Shields in Iowa City, Blessed by Nature in Aledo, Griswold Archery in Galesburg, Illinois.
Cameron, yeah.
So go and get those tickets, and we will see you on Friday, July 23rd. Thank you again for listening. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, just so you guys know, the next part of this multi-series kind of whitetail tip, tactic, and trick thing is probably going to be stand placement. I think that's the next one. We're going to break it down from the bottom up, from tree selection to stand selection, to how we hang them, why we hang them, cover, you name it, we're going to cover it. Hopefully it helps you become a better hunter. And we'll see you next time.
All right, sounds good. Don't waste it.